Namaste. Wishing everyone a very happy Purnima. Shubha Vaishakha Purnima, Shubha Buddha Purnima, Shubha Somvar, and happy eclipse also. Today is a very auspicious day and a very good day to also reflect and introspect. And to introspect, we have with us our guest for today's IG Live, that is Rajvi Mehta ji. I will just send her an invite and have her on board with us.
Harsh.
Hi Rajvi, namaste. How are
Hi,
you?
namaste, namaste. Nice to see you after a long time. Yeah,
Yeah, it's been some time. Yes.
looking after
Are
the
you in
last year
Mumbai?
good stuff. Yeah, very much in Mumbai. Yeah, tell me.
Okay. Yeah. My sound is clear to you, yeah? Yeah, I can hear you
Yeah,
clearly also.
you can hear
Is
me
it
also
possible you
well?
can?
Okay,
Yeah. Are you holding your phone? Maybe you want to set it down somewhere.
okay,
Is that possible? So then you don't, then you have your hands will be free. Yeah.
yeah,
Okay.
okay. Does this work? Yeah,
Yes, that works. Great. Wonderful. We have our viewers. You can just say hi to all those who have joined in.
yeah. Hello to everybody, and thanks to Hello My Yoga for inviting me. And it's a pleasure to be chatting with Harsh. So, yes, Harsh.
Yes. So let's start. I'll give a short introduction to our viewers. Those many of them might already know you, many might not know you, maybe meeting you for the first time. So just a brief introduction, and then we'll kickstart this conversation. Okay. So, Dr. Rajvi Mehta is a student of Iyengar Yoga for over 4 decades, having studied directly under Guruji BKS Iyengar, Srimati Geeta ji, and Sri teacher at international yoga conferences in various countries. She is an advisor to the Ministry of Ayush on scientific research and other various activities. The founder and editor of the magazine Yoga Rahasya, which has got subscribers in over 40 countries. She has also edited Guruji BKS Iyengar's book Yoga for Sports and is the author of her recently published book Imagine If, which tells us about the stories of ordinary people with extraordinary grits. This book was published just last year by Westland Publications, and currently, Rajviji is involved in research on Iyengar Yoga, particularly with Parkinson's disease, in the principal investigation of the department, and is the principal investigator in the Department of Science and Technology. She has her doctorate in reproductive biology from the National Institute for Research in Reproductive Health in Mumbai and is one of the most senior clinical embryologists in India. Thank you so much, Rajvi ji, for accepting this invitation to discuss about your book. And I have it right here with me. So, for our viewers as well, this is the book, Imagine If. And it's a beautiful cover also. It's an astonishingly amazing book. It's so inspiring. And yes, I really like how you started the book, actually. You know, Rajvi, the practice of yoga, it starts like when we study Sankhya, when we study yoga, we study about Tridukha, about suffering. And we know that the practice of yoga is to accept this suffering, to transcend this suffering. And so beautifully in your book as well, you started with suffering, a choice. So please, can you tell us,
Yes.
what inspired you to write this book and share it with everyone?
Well, as you just mentioned, I have been the editor of Yoga Rahasya. And as an editor, I have always been on lookout for some amazing practitioners. When I say amazing, I don't mean in their practices, but how they've adapted yoga into day-to-day life. So over the years, when I traveled, I would meet such people. And normally when you would meet such people, you would may not have delved deep into their history, as I would say. So I met many of these people and I was quite inspired myself and to really understand how they perceived their own lives and how they adapted the practice of yoga in their own lives. And therefore, when I got an opportunity to write the book, I decided to write about these people who I say are ordinary people. I mean, people who lived like possibly most of us an ordinary life, going through the ups and downs of life. But when they had an experience of some traumatic experience, traumatic as we would say it, but the way they perceived it and the way they moved forward, and I would say forward possibly much far ahead. And that's why I decided to write this book. And as you mentioned, the first chapter is I titled it Suffering a Choice, because it's just how you look at things. And life is all about perceptions, is what I feel in most cases. So, for example, when you say, it's not about, when children say, for example, are fussy about food and somebody will tell me, oh, there are people who don't get food, see how fortunate you're getting. That is comparing to something which is negative, and saying, oh, you are fortunate. That's not what I was looking for. What I found was that the whole perception, the way they looked at things, it was not negative or positive. Just the way they looked at things was so very unique and different. And possibly that despite what it would appear to us to be very traumatic, they just sailed through it. So that's why I realized that they had a big message for all of us. And, stories are the best form of communication.
That's so true, because when I was reading the book as well, I felt so engrossed and so in the story, living the story. And it's beautiful, like you said, it's about the play of perception and how one looks at pain and suffering, how one is able to accept pain and suffering, and how one handles it as well. So the suffering, a choice chapter is really a very nice, I would say, like a
Yeah. Yeah, Harsh.
start to the book and to all the stories that are described in the book as well. Let's look into one of these stories. I think I was really inspired by the one on cancer as well, multiple cancer. Shirley, if I got her name right,
Yes.
and some of the
Yes.
quotes I've taken from the book, some of the lines, the takeaways, which I think also may have impacted you. I felt as though that this was bringing about some changes in you as well, and your perception of how to approach this practice and this life. And one of them was that cancer is a part of life. Don't make it bigger than life. It's up to each one of us what we choose, what to latch onto. And this power of choice is there with each one of us. Can you tell us about it? Since you've had the hands on experience with these people, you've met them. Can you tell us a little bit about that, please?
Yes. So, as I said, I met Shirley in one of the classes, and she was walking around and she wouldn't participate, which is not very typical of a class where, there's a lot of discipline. And then she told me that she has a specific sequence and a set of asanas and guidance given by Guruji. I said, okay, then why aren't you following it? I'm waiting for my result. What result? Cancer result. And for a moment, honestly speaking, because my perception of somebody with cancer would be, a set of seriousness, and to somebody walking around light-hearted, it made me question whether it was true. And that's I would say my limitation, the way I saw people. And you have certain mindsets and you expect that, and when that doesn't happen, you question. So when I really talked to people and found out, my immediate respect for her went up. That somebody could, it was not denial. That's the biggest thing. It wasn't denial. It was just acceptance. And that ability to accept whatever is to come, I think is very unique. It is very nice to sit on a podium and say, whatever life has in store, take it. But to actually take it, we have heard of, Raman Maharshis and Ramakrishna Paramans and, that level of yogis. But to see a common person adapting and accepting, to me was a big, big impact. And especially when she said this statement, part of life, why are you making it big? And it came again with reference to one of the programs we were having in Mumbai, and I invited her to talk to many support groups because I felt, she talks to many of the cancer support groups. It would give a lot of courage and hope to the practitioners, to the patients. And then my receptionist asked me, Rajvi, does she really have this problem? So I jokingly told her, and she says, why are you big? It's is any kind of disturbance or something which doesn't is not what you expected, we get affected. And then you say, okay, it's just a part. And then just a part made a big difference. So yes, it did impact me in a big way. It made me realize that, whatever it is, it's not just something to pass, it's just to accept. And then find things around it, how to handle it. So it was something different because it was not a logical way, that you say, okay, a problem has come, I find a solution. It wasn't that also. It wasn't denial also. It was just sheer acceptance. And that level of acceptance is not very common. We may do it because we don't have a choice. You accept because, oh, what else can I do? It wasn't that. It is just pure acceptance. And that purity of acceptance, I think, gives us a lot of inner strength because we don't lose the energy in trying to understand why or, find solutions. You just move on. Okay, what's it? So that gives you a lot of clarity of thought, and which is also something that yoga gives, tremendous clarity of thought. So that's also something which was, I learned from Shirley, and I still learn from her whenever I talk to her. Yeah.
Yes. I think there's a lot to learn just from hearing the stories about Shirley and about the other people in your book as well. And I find this, this thread being drawn. Guruji is talking to us through the book as well. And you mention a lot of things that he says. And one of the quotes that you've also highlighted is, and what also really propelled you into writing this, I think, maybe was the yoga teaches us what need not be endured and endure what cannot be cured.
Yeah. So this was, I think Guruji had said it to some student, and it reverberates because today, as yoga practitioners or young yoga practitioners, when we haven't seen a lot of life, we tend to think that, yoga is going to cure everything. Of course, when you go through, people find. So one thing is that it gave a very clear message. Yoga cures what need not be endured, and that there are many things which we can cure. And when you say cure, there is a big the medical analysis appropriate, corrected? Is it being symptom free? Because say if you have a back pain, you may be free of symptoms, but you may not have, if you were to get your MRI, it may not have rectified, but you have been able to get rid of symptoms. So you see, there are various dimensions to what we understand as a cure. Or have we been able to withstand it? Or just endure it? So this tells us that yes, yoga may not cure everything, because if yoga cured every malady on the earth, then yogis would be permanent. So everybody would have mrityu ichha and have ichha mrityu. So that is not the thing. So the fact is, for practitioners, I'm not talking of yogis, we are all practitioners of yoga. There is hardly one yogi. As practitioners, it tells us that yes, let's accept it, that it cannot cure everything, but at the same time, it gives us the ability to endure, and which is a big thing, so you can endure it. And here I realized through the book or the various stories that I've said, that yoga played a big important role in their enduring whatever life threw into them. And there are many things which we can cure, so why not utilize the system, the tradition? So it has a very deep meaning, and I think in most of the times, it is all about endurance. How do we withstand the problem? And it is not that we go fanatically and say, I will only use yoga. I think only I will use the methodology of yoga. I think we need to be open and broad-minded and say there are various things and whatever is applicable. But at the same time, yoga being non-invasive, with something which you work on yourself, so it is more of internal regulation, we can utilize that for many of the chronic conditions or physical or emotional that we are faced with. So it's quite a deep quote, and especially the second half makes a lot of sense. Because, as science comes in, we find more and more diseases. So 1900s, you had infectious diseases. When antibiotics were discovered, we thought that's the end of it. We will not have problems anymore, antibiotics, and now we've developed antibiotic resistance. Then when the vaccines came in, we said we'll never have vaccines. So new viruses have come in. So it goes on, of course, medical science has played a big, big role in improving the quality of life, improving human lifespan. But at the same time, to have a happy life, to have a contented life is also equally important. We don't want to be in a situation where you have long life, but you're waiting to see the end of life. Or people around you are waiting, okay, let this person's life end. So that joy, that happiness, that independence, that and the whole ability to understand yourself, the S, capital S, is what yoga is all about. So I think that quote has a lot, like Guruji's many quotes. This one has deep meaning. So sometimes I call it, these are the sutras of Guruji, where you need to sort of analyze and explain and give commentaries and maybe tons of examples where they can be applicable.
That's beautiful. What you're saying, I really resonate with that. What this book is actually is, I would say, practical yoga philosophy, practical yoga sutras that I can see being applied through storytelling. And if anyone who's done, who's studied Yoga Sutras, studying Yoga Sutras, they will see this too. And you've quoted also in many of the places about asana, about suffering, and different places. You've used some of the sutras and shown how they have been practically implemented in someone's life. And I feel this sutra that Guruji is telling us, endure what cannot be cured. He's also hinting us to heyam dukkham anagatam, the pain that is yet to come, Patanjali says, that can
Yes,
be endured
can
very well through the practice of yoga.
yes.
So, yes, wonderful. I also noticed you talked a lot about parts of the Bhagavad Gita, and you spoke about Shad Ripu, and you spoke about being and the importance of a healthy conscience and how yoga can contribute to that. So, can you please
Yes.
describe for our viewers what do you mean exactly by a healthy conscience, and how can we achieve that state of it?
See, basically, what conscience is the antakarna, something deep inside us which tells us, beyond law, beyond rules, beyond regulations, what is right or what is wrong. There is something which, when we do a thing, we know we are not doing it right, or we know it is not right, or it's wrong, it's unethical. We may justify it. And that is what is, to me, as I understand, is your conscience. And I somehow feel, and I may or may not be right, is that when you are very young, your conscience is, very evolved in a sense. So as a child, if you do something wrong, you want to immediately let it out of your system. If you have forgotten, as a small kid forgets a water bottle in school and they have forgotten it, they will, unless they develop that ability to hide, if they are being, if parents or caregivers or your, the guardians shout at them. But otherwise, they will be very honest. Children are very honest. So that is their conscience speaking. But as we grow, we are more concerned about our physical well-being. If the child falls, cries, forgets, and is on. If we have fallen, we will go on. I mean, when I say we, I don't, I mean the older generation, myself, I'm not talking of her. So basically, we'll say, okay, oh, my knee is hurting and this is there. And we're so concerned about that. How concerned are we about something deep within us? So the first time you do something wrong, and it may be something trivial, breaking, I wouldn't call it, but say you bypassed a traffic signal. I don't want to say it's a trivial offense, but it's an offense. You may be conscious of it. I did it by mistake. Oh, then for many it becomes a habit. It's normal. So then your conscience is gone deep, deep in, covered by many layers where you are not even bothered about it. And then when somebody's questioned, you'll have a whole list of justifications of why you did it and why there is nothing wrong with it. If something is true, you don't need justifications. You don't need to explain. It is truth. It is clear. Why do we need to justify? So this is what I feel is that the conscience evolves with the practice of yoga. Where then what is all Bhagavad Gita all about? It is dharma. What is Bhagavad Gita basically about? It is dharma. What is dharma? It's not a religion or a philosophy. It tells you it's something which uplifts you, which is intrinsic to you. It's like, okay, this is the path that I need to take. When you evolve, so that dharma which evolves in the practitioner, so you don't need rules and regulations. We don't need rules and regulations if everybody is following what is right. But when we deviate from the path, and when more people deviate on the path, then you need rules and regulations. Then you need laws. Then you need people who implement the law. Then you need people who analyze the law and punish if an offense is created. So every activity, we don't have laws or rules. It's only when people start deviating. So if it gets us back to our conscience evolving, and we don't need to deviate from this path, then everything will happen the way it should, way we should. Of course, we are humans and we will deviate. But at least the deviation may not be so much. So if it doesn't deviate so much, it's possible to come back. So that I feel that the practice of yoga helps us devolve our conscience. Antakarna, as Guruji would often explain. And when that antakarna is there, so which is deepest. So, there are different layers of health, the physical, the physiological, the mental, emotional, intellectual, the consciousness, how it flows, the awareness in the body. If there are blockages, then there's the health of the conscience. And when all these are there, then you are also, your society is healthier. Because if I am irritated and I go to work, my irritation is going to go to my subordinates. And then they cannot talk back to me. So it will pass on to somebody else, or it will go back home. And we are creating an unhealthy environment just because one person was irritated for whatever reason. So if we can have a control over these situations, then we may not be passing, we'll be passing happiness around, health around, and it should come naturally. That's what I feel, so that's the practice develops this kind of natural expressions in us.
I find a lot of it being related with the yamas and niyamas, also the part of a healthy conscience. And we come back to it, like the practice of asana pranayam helps us to become aware of those, the previous patterns and start to, re-stitch those patterns up. So thank you for sharing about your views on that as well. Let's go into a little bit about a yoga teacher's approach to a student. And from your book, the story on Mark, who had a phantom limb, he lost both his legs in the Afghan war and an arm as well, and he was on prosthetics. And he was being able to do a Shirshasana, as you'll read from the book and be inspired. But one thing I noticed in that is you spoke of how Guruji approached him. About how, in that chapter, I think Guruji approaches another one of the students who has a missing leg as well, who you attended to. And for him, it was like the person didn't really have a missing leg. The way he perceived his students was not as a way that I felt was someone who was handicapped or someone who was, going through something very bad in life, but it was just a situation that had changed for them and how we can adapt to that. So can you please talk about, a yoga teacher's approach to a student?
Yeah, so basically Guruji didn't teach Mark. There was teachers in California who were teaching Mark. And the example that you rightly said was when Guruji was teaching a person with amputated leg. Now see, the first thing what I've observed of Guruji over the decades is that when he was teaching a patient or helping a patient or guiding a patient, it appeared as if he went and became the patient himself. So, he could immediately gauge the problem, the pain, and the limitations. And therefore, he found solutions in that. He didn't become aloof and instruct. So, if I can tell, okay, turn this, turn that, he actually, you could see that as if that pain was taken over by him. And I'm not talking in a very philosophical sense, I'm talking in a practical sense. And that was the biggest learning while teaching people who had the medical ailments or something, that a lot of it reflected in the body. We talk so much about body language, but what exactly is this body language? What does it tell you? It just doesn't tell you your mind and emotions. It tells you much, much more. So if you look at the patient, and as a long-time practitioner, you can actually imitate the patient and see in this kind of condition which the patient is, what happens to your body. And then you can relate to what happens to that person. And then how do you go ahead and find a solution? So, for example, when this person who had an amputated leg, now to me, I was an observer, I was observing that person. So for me, he was an object. I was looking at him. And then I saw, okay, he had to be made to do Ardha Chandrasana. I made him do it on the leg which existed. And then I stopped, because how can I make him do Ardha Chandrasana on the leg that didn't exist? But even if the leg didn't exist, the rest of the body parts which were dependent on the legs existed. And that's why they were in pain, they were in suffering. That was primarily the hip and the buttock and the back. So Guruji could perceive that. And because of that, he created, quote unquote, a leg with props. So it was not a prosthetic limb, it was just the props, and then made him do it. And then it made sense, because like the leg, and he could apply pressure, he found relief on the back, right, what he was suffering from. So that is the approach, is to really understand. And therefore, it is a lot of subjective learning. We cannot have prescriptions in the practice. 10 people may come with a back pain. 10 people may have different causes, may have different locations. There will be a guideline. I'm not saying it's 100% subjective. There will be a framework within which we work. So that needs to be there. But the skill lies with the teacher, and that skill comes only with practice, practical experience, not just teaching, but by one's own practice. So at least in our tradition, and especially Guruji, he was very insistent on practice, that it is extremely important, not for the sake of practice of mechanically doing it or being fit, but actually practicing so that your understanding goes deeper and deeper, not remaining at the superficial scratching level. So that is very, very crucial whenever you are looking. I mean, just to give you an example, yesterday I had a small kid coming in, referred by one of the surgeons, who had pain in the rectal area. Now, ideally, we would have thought of certain things. The first thing I noticed was the way he was walking. And that he not only flat foot, there was some crossing. So immediately when my attention didn't go, my attention was to rectify that or do asanas where this would possibly get some correction, and his pain was less for that moment. Obviously, it's not magic and it will not go away. But if he practices, so the point I'm trying to make is that whatever be the location of the pain, the location of, you may find the source somewhere else. And that eyes you need to develop as a teacher, to see, to observe. So observation is very, very crucial, and the observation is not merely external, it's internal. So that you are becoming the person. So when Guruji once mentioned, you people are watching, I become. Now it makes sense after maybe 15, 20 years, how he becomes, how he became the patient. So it's not like, going when my soul goes in there or something that kind, but you could feel it. You can see his body, the patient, and you can feel it. And that is very important, to go to the level of the student. The significance of the teacher is that they have to go to the level of the student and then evolve them. There is no point in talking big, sounding big, and so that they feel, oh, the teacher knows so much. They're coming to you. They're coming to learn from you. So they expect you to know more. Otherwise, why will they come to you? So there's no need to impress a student. What are we trying to impress? What we need to do is make them, evolve them. And that, I think, is the duty of the teacher, is to evolve the student. So that comes in multiple dimensions, internal confidence, external confidence. There are various phases to that. And that made Guruji what he was. I mean, wherever he went in the world, people were in awe of him, whatever his age. whatever, people were awed. So if you have seen the videos when he went to China at the age of 93, he was like a rock star. I mean, literally people following him, and you're shocked. The fact is that, it was nothing. He didn't do anything. He had not even spoken to them. But the practice got them attracted, because they did it and say, oh, he is taught it in this manner. And this is what effect it gives me. So let me see what more I can get. So that is, I think, the level of teacher, or the beauty of a teacher.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing such beautiful words and such beautiful encouragement for current yoga teachers, people who are yoga practitioners as well, to know what really are the role of a yoga teacher and the qualities that a yoga teacher ought to develop when they are when they're practicing yoga and moving forward on the path to teach as well. So thank you for that. You spoke of developing this observation faculty, this inner sense of seeing, and very beautifully that comes across in the story with who was that?
Bridget.
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 Correct, right.
Yes,
And
yes.
her inner sight and how she developed her inner sight. Please tell our viewers a little bit about this, and how yoga helps for proprioception and becoming aware of yourself in relation
Yeah.
to your environment. Yes.
Yes. So Bridget was this young German lady, and I met her she used to come to the institute, and I met her for the first time when we were having this International Yoga Week in Rishikesh. And I saw that, she was so perfectly aligned in her poses, and, we could see. And Guruji would often get her on stage and say, see, this is alignment. And it was very interesting that, supposing we did Trikonasana, we would lean a bit on one side, and this lady was perfect. And then while talking to her, she came back and said, when I'm doing this, I feel all of you are doing it so well, but I am not straight. I am crooked. And I was wondering why she's saying it, because she was actually going by what she felt. And she had developed that immense sense of proprioception. And that's when you realize that we have many senses. And the one that is used the most, I would say, is the eyes. The eyes, the ears, the sense of taste, but more the eyes. For example, if you're teaching children, or you're teaching, you say something, but if I say keep the hand straight and my hand is crooked, the majority of the students will keep their hands crooked. That means the eyes are catching faster than the ears. And therefore, but beyond that, and therefore we tend to overuse them, in general. Then when you come one step forward, we have the sense of touch, which we don't really use much. That touch guides us much more, because that makes us much more sensitive. If my touch is more pure. Now people may consider, if I'm doing my asana and I'm talking about pressing the palms, they will say, oh, this is physical practice. The fact is, when I am sensing touch, what is sensing? Is it just physical? Is it my mind? Is this the ability to act and react? I feel. What do I feel? I observe. So observation is not just eyes. So that skill develops, and then you realize that there is also your ability to understand where you are with reference to your environment. So, we say be aware of the environment. Why do we need to say? Because we are not aware. But now when you develop that sense of proprioception, you start becoming very receptive to the environment, very concerned about the environment, and that you develop a sense of actual balance, that sense of proprioception of where we are. So we do have it. If a person has an altered sense of proprioception, their finger will not go to their nose, it will go somewhere else. And mind you, the sense of proprioception is there with the muscles. So, science has now found that edges of the muscles, it is where you have these Golgi tendon complexes, which actually give the sense of proprioception. So when now you understand that when Guruji would very, very be particular, hands straight means straight. Why? Because that developed a sense of proprioception. And that sense of proprioception is an additional sensory perception, which comes from within. So he had not studied, at least I presume, theoretically about sense of proprioception and all those things, but he, from his own practical experience, evolved the practices to that level. So, people say, oh, hands are straight, my hands are straight, and I'm following B.K. Iyengar. It's not just hands straight, it is internal hands straight. And that sense doesn't happen overnight. And that's the reason you need, I mean, if Patanjali had said, Satu Dirgha Kala Nairantarya, long hours of uninterrupted practice, why did he say that? Why didn't he say do it in a week or a month and do a 1 month's course? It's a beginning. Every course is a beginning. But then when you actually get into the practice of yoga, it is timeless. So that is something which you learn when you see the level of when one sight is lost. So we always say, people who are visually impaired have a sixth sense. We talk about it because even if you see on the streets of Mumbai, they go around climbing trains and bridges, crossing roads, and most of the time they do it independently. And there are many of these people, and it is admirable. They may need to do it because possibly they have to earn their own livelihood. And you see them and you sort of pity them. But if you actually try to study them, it's how have they developed this? How have they evolved this? And that is something which you saw, especially when you met Bridget, because who had vision till the age of 18 and she lost it after that. So, how much that sense evolved, and the yoga practice helped her to do that.
Yes, it did. It did help her to overcome the limit of just this external vision, and the internal vision started growing and blossoming in that manner. So
Yeah.
thank you. We have about another 15 minutes. I just want to let our viewers know that if they have any questions, they're most welcome to comment, to send in a question. We have a questions box as well. Anything from the book, if you've read it, we want to know more about it, where can you get it, anything about Iyengar Yoga, whatever's coming to you. If you have any questions, please shoot them at us. And we'll go for the last topic, last discussion round that we have, and that is about you conclude the book by saying you specify two things. One is about developing strength, and the other is coping with trauma. And you've also given very nicely in the book, certain sequences that could be utilized for those. So, can you tell us a little bit about these two aspects that you highlighted in the book?
Yeah. See, basically, I mean, trauma is, again, I feel very, very relative. Everybody experiences, at some point in life, you are going to lose a near and dear one. And it is a traumatic phase. And most of the time, one gets over it. Not that you forget those people, but you sort of manage to go on with life. But when there are extreme traumatic conditions, there is a different way of approaching it. And especially when there's a mass extreme traumatic condition, which the only time I have experienced something like this, and it was as an observer, not as a person who directly experienced a trauma, was in the earthquake that happened in Gujarat. And honestly speaking, when you see hundreds of people who have lost everything in life, literally everything, they had lost homes, they have lost documents, they have lost jewelry, everything, and family members. And it's not just one, everybody around, and how they were living. And what was for me was, means, and when such things happen, I think every human being who's there, the humanity comes out and we all want to help. So whenever we see any great trauma, we all want to contribute in whatever way we can. And most of the time we contribute in cash and kind. So when we were approached to say, can you teach them yoga? It seemed like, oh, let's do something for them. People are suffering. But the point was how to help. We may want to do it. Do we know how to handle these situations? And mind you, it's not easy because most of the time as teachers of yoga, you have students coming to you. Here you are going to them. There is some organization which wanted us to teach them yoga. What about it was a camp. It was a camp for the survivors. And they want to do it. And it was quite ironic that this was organized by the Aga Khan Foundation, the Ismaili Aga Khan Foundation, and at such times it becomes religious. Although they were not fanatically religious or anything, because otherwise they wouldn't have invited us to come and teach there. And the moment we went there, we were told that you have not to do anything objectionable. So I was like, what is objectionable? So I understood, it was don't recite home and all. That's fine. I mean, okay, it doesn't matter at that point of time. I don't want anything to do with that. Then they said, do it out there in the, you are in Kutch, near desert with all the sand around and all the rubble following the earthquake. And they said, no, you can't do it in the Jamaat Khana because that's our prayer hall. And for me, that was the only place in the. But you know how gradually they got convinced to do it. And Guruji had advised her, be with them. That's most important. If you are going to be outside, it will not work. So literally, those small tips, which were so very practical, he didn't give us many tips on what to teach in that sense, but all these practical tips of how do we become one with that community. And once that happened, many ways we could start helping them. And I mean, I was most touched, and it's nearly 21 years now, and I still remember those young people. They were teenagers, and who went and said, isme bhi kuch acha hua hai, something good has happened out of this. So I was like, what good, I was saying, where would we have had teachers coming and teaching us computers, coming and teaching us yoga, teaching us English. And then I said, it sort of made me realize how they perceived things again. It wasn't just objectively saying, trying to be positive. We hear a lot about saying, be positive, be positive. By saying be positive, nobody becomes positive. But here, just being with them, we had gone there to help them suffering. We came back learning instead, and then we realized that the way they looked at things. And all these people have been, therefore, to me, I feel that they have managed to get through the trauma. What appeared to me as trauma is primarily because the way they saw things. They didn't see the things like ordinary people did. They saw things differently. And I think we need to develop that tool, which is inbuilt in all of us. They needed it, so it evolved. It doesn't evolve in all. And most of the time it is subdued in all of us because we don't need it. But if we evolve that tool, then we will be different human beings, that will be our own self-evolution in the process. So that's something which I feel that it's all life is how you see. And how you see can be developed because you have the tool of seeing within. So, these. So.
That's a very nice way to put it also. And just these two simple words, look within, really so much depth that we can carry forth into that. And it also reminded me of the quote of Guruji that yoga does not change the way a person sees things, it transforms the person who sees. So it's working at a very fundamental level. And this goes for all forms of yoga, be it Iyengar Yoga or any other yoga that you're practicing. The essence is that it brings about in the transformation of the individual, in the transformation of consciousness, and leading to a healthy conscience. It's such a wonderful conversation that we're having out here, and we have one question that we can take from the audience. So one of the questions is that, do you think yoga is religious?
Yoga is not religious. It's a dharma. It is a practice. So it develops religiosity. That is what Guruji has said. So it is not a religion in that sense at all. Because it is the science of religiosity. It is what upholds us. What is dharma? Dharma is what upholds us. So it is not a religion as conventionally seen by people, as what people see as religion.
I agree with you. I feel that those elements of yoga, the essence of yoga is present in all of the religions, and therefore how yoga becomes a grammar, a sort of grammar of spirituality for all these religions to unite. Yoga by itself meaning union, meaning unification of all, of everything. It's beautiful. Yoga is all inclusive. There's no exclusivity in yoga.
And you find that people who are actually, the practice of yoga makes one appreciates one's own religion. So I have met Jews who possibly were not religious but practice of yoga, and they continue and they become more religious Jews. I have met people have always raised, sometimes there's a small group which raises issues about religion in the practice of yoga. Well, I remember I distinctly teaching in Jordan, in Amman, and this was possibly after the class was over, and this was run by a lady who is a Muslim, naturally, and she asked me to leave the yoga mat, and I said, okay, maybe it's her special mat, because she didn't want me to pick it up. And then she says, no, I will just time for namaz. And she had her prayers. So what are we talking about? And the same people want to recite the sutra. So, we are narrowing down religion in very sense. But in reality, yoga encompasses everything. So I think it's far beyond the normal, common perception of religion.
I agree, definitely.
Yeah.
If anyone has more questions, we can entertain one more. And in the meanwhile, I just want to thank Rajvi ji for sharing these stories and writing this book, and reaching out to everyone out here, all the yoga teachers. This book is really for everyone. Everyone can pick up this book and read it, enjoy it. So we have one more question by JB Karma. Can you speak a bit on teaching yoga in the prison? Please, Rajvi ji.
Okay. Well, I have not taught in the prison, but I did visit. And, I have this whole idea that to err is human, we say, and all of us would have made mistakes in lives. Some mistakes did not cause a lot of damage to yourself or anybody. Some have caused damage or maybe grave damage to somebody. Now, these errors can be intentional or unintentional. But if they have caused major harm to somebody, then it becomes a criminal offense. Or it becomes offense, and then you will land up in prison. Now, the first thing is there are people who have done things not unintentionally totally, but because of being uncontrolled with their own emotions. So most of the acts of crime would be because of kama, krodha, lobha, moha. So whether it is lust, it is greed, it is desire, it is anger. So these are the causes of most, I wouldn't say all, but most. And some of these are such which have been done in the spur of the moment. They repent. Now, should we, just because they repent, laws are different in different countries, let them go? So there comes in this whole idea that if you can involve yoga, then what happens is that these elements which made them behave in this manner, for which they're repenting, but we can never be sure that again this may erupt. That bout of anger may erupt and they may cause harm to somebody else. So that is the why, okay, there has to be punishment, but if there can be a subduing of these elements, then you are helping people. On the other hand, a person has committed, you've seen the transform, that you have different levels of consciousness, there are different levels. So at least you can have, get them to practice. So this is something which is very, very interesting and I think very useful. And so that everybody gets a chance to transform. We also have a chance to transform. All of us are aiming to transform ourselves. So why not the people in prison? Not that all we get transformed, but at least some who have in a state some level of transformation. So why not? But it's not easy because there'll be a lot of rules and regulations. And that's where I learned my lesson. You can't even take a pin into a prison cell, because you can do bodily harm. You can't take threads in there. The space is limited. Again, so you cannot touch anybody. So there are a lot of limitations which would be there. So of course, it's a different skill set. So I could see the difference because when I went to that prison in Hull in UK, and there was this group which was being taught, they were sex offenders who were being taught for about 2 years or so. And, it seemed like I was in any yoga class. Once you're in the class, you wouldn't have realized that you are within the walls of the prison. Of course, you had gone in. And when we went in, the whole place was quiet because possibly that was the time. But when the class got over and we walked out. It was scary after we were there, because that's the time the rest of the inmates were gathered together. And the sounds and the booing and the shouting, it was, for a moment, you were shaken. Of course, there were guards around, and they were behind the bars, they were there. So nobody was in direct contact, but it was fearful. So if you know of one criminal, if there are hundreds around you, it's not a pleasant experience. So then you see the difference that had been done. But it's not good. It's not easy to motivate them to do it. But if somewhere, some change, I always feel, we should compare today with yesterday and not try to have saying, oh, what it was, and get some 100% results. Little change, step by step. So that's something which should be incorporated. So
Thank you.
along
Thank you
with punishment or prevention, we can get this going. Yeah.
Thank you for answering that. I hope he
Yeah.
felt, the person who asked also was happy. I felt really good with that answer. And yes, I would recommend that they pick up the book and read the story about the story in prison as well, and the approach that the book describes. That's very wonderful. So this brings us to a close for this conversation, but many more to come. And we still have some questions. I request our participants, our viewers, to please send in your questions to info@hellomyyog.com, and we'll forward them to Rajvi ji, and we'll get a reply to you. And I'll take this opportunity to thank Rajvi ji for taking the time out from all that she's doing wonderfully to share about her life experiences, share about her book, and thank you so much. There's a beautiful sutra of acceptance of yoga through the stories that you tell us, and I encourage all of you to please pick up this book. You will not regret it. I am so happy I got a copy for myself. So I know I'm going to keep referring to this because there are some really nice snippets and treasures that we can practically implement in our life. So thank you to the team at Hello My Yoga as well for having Rajvi ji with us. And yes, we have many more IG lives coming up. So every full moon, every month, we'll be meeting again, and we hope to see you again next month. Thank you,
Thank you,
Rajvi
Harsh.
ji. Thank
Thank
you.
you, Harsh. Thank you, Shivani, for inviting me. And I'm happy to have any feedback, positive or any suggestions on my book. It's my first attempt, and I'll be happy to have it from my audience. Thank you so much. Right.
Thank you. Okay.
Okay. Bye-bye. Bye. Bye.
Bye bye. Hari Om.
Hari Om.